By the end of this presentation, perhaps you will become more clear about how living in harmony means embracing the existence of disharmony. And embracing the existence of disharmony becomes easier when one understands the anatomy of judgment. Anatomy and understanding the anatomy of judgment enables one to live in harmony. So that's what we will be talking about today. This series of presentations came about a number of years ago, maybe 10 years ago. I did a couple of them in the Northeast gathering in New York. And then I went to Australia and I did one, it was a few hours in Avatar's Abode. And then the next time I went, it was a 2-day presentation. So here we have 3 hours and I'll do the best I can. And also over the years, my understanding of harmony, of judgment, of personality, of relationship, of conflict has been maturing as well. So you're getting the best right now. How about that?
I'll be the judge of that.
I know you're getting the best of me. What you think is something different.
Very funny. I like it.
So what I'm presenting, it's really, it's no way I'm interpreting what Baba said. What I'm presenting is from my experience and my understanding. And it all started one year. I was at the Northeast gathering in New York, and a film was shown with Erich. And in the film, and unfortunately, I don't remember the name of the film. I will find out one of these years. In the film, Erich said that Baba said, I can give you everything except harmony among yourselves. That was amazing. When I heard that, I froze. I even say it now and I get the goosebumps. And when I heard that, immediately coming from where I'm a psychotherapist in New York, and I also write poetry. So that's basically what I do in my life, a lot of hours. And my soul circulates around those activities. But when I heard that, I realized, what does that mean? What can it mean? What can possibly mean? And I came to the conclusion that most probably it means harmony among ourselves is our responsibility, solely our responsibility. And at the time, since the early 90s, I've been studying a system of psychology that it took me 10 years to understand. I just felt it was connected to the teaching of Samskaras of Baba, and I couldn't figure it out because Baba is offering us spiritual teaching. And here I am involved in psychology, and I'm taking information from the psychological angle. So it took me at least 10 years, and giving a lot of presentations. You know, when you present, you actually learn. When you teach, it's the best way to learn. So to understand how the two can actually go together and work together instead of against each other. And that's what I will be presenting today. So I want to start by the usual definition of harmony. So I went in the dictionary and it says the origin is Greek, like me. So, and it comes from armos, joint. And then Latin from harmonia, joining, concord. So harmony has to do with joint and moving together. And of course, in the musical sense, they talk about the combination of simultaneously sounded musical notes to produce chords and chord progressions having a pleasing effect. So when you think harmony, you're thinking pleasant. You're thinking moving together. That's what I think when I think harmony. So why is it so difficult and such a challenge to have harmony in relationships? So there are 3 conditions that guarantee disharmony. So how about we start with that? What makes disharmony? What invites disharmony? I thought that was a good start. So, 3 conditions. First, having a personality. 2, having samskaras. And 3, having minimum understanding of the anatomy and the role of judgment in disharmony. So today's afternoon, it will be visiting these 3 areas. So when you think about personality, what do you think about? When you think personality, my personality, your personality, what comes to mind?
Specific sort of traits, different traits.
Different traits, all right.
They're quiet, or they're loud, or they're...
Pardon me?
You know, they might be quiet, or especially boisterous, or shy, or
So traits.
Introvert,
all those kinds of things.
extrovert, introvert.
Introvert, extrovert,
Obnoxious.
How your persona or how your individuality projects itself out in the world.
How your individuality projects itself out in the world.
Is your personality.
Okay?
How
Facades.
God wants to speak to me now.
Pardon me?
How God wants to speak to me now.
I don't understand that. Tell me more.
So I think of personalities as just God speaking to me.
Okay.
Facades.
Facades? Facades? Anything else? When you think about personality? Okay. You're all right. I mean, there are different facets.
Different sense of humor.
What,
Different sense of humor.
different, that's part of personality.
It's our egos, it's our non-spirit, it's our ego in some ways, in the world, it's almost a line, same thing as ego in some ways. It's the part that is sort of Baba, the spirit in form, expressing itself, to try to, sort of the non-love in some ways, trying to align with love.
Okay.
If that sounds...
So, I found, how many of you are familiar with Practical Spirituality by John Grant? Okay, it's a beautiful book. So on page 104, 105, I found this. Now this is the only time I will be reading. Usually I don't read, but this is important to read. So, because John Grant presents this as what Baba said about our nature. Baba then went on to say that in one of his couplets, Hafiz says, "How can you step on the path of truth unless you step out of the boundary of your own nature?" Baba said, the path of God realization has untold and intolerable hardships and suffering. Even yogis and saints are unable to fathom my reality. But what is one's own nature? All this John presents, Baba said. And he goes on to say, I am not going to repeat the theme of evolution of forms and consciousness, which has been explained at length in God Speaks. Best to begin this discourse with the birth of a child. The child takes birth according to his past karma. He will act, think, feel according to his samskaras gathered in past lives. There is no way out of it for the child. This is what I call the law of must. M-U-S-T. The law of must. This law sticks to the child from birth to death. It has formulated the nature of the child and has become the child's very nature. In addition to this inexorable law of must, the environmental circumstances of the child are such that he cannot but act and feel according to the impressions of the experience of past lives. That's something, huh? Okay. So I try to follow from there because these are Baba's words. And since we bring our own nature, I thought it was a good idea to get to know it. How many of you know your personality? Know your natural nature, natural? Because when you know it, actually, when you know your personality, when you know your nature, it becomes easier if you need to restrain it. Because in the chapter of the discourses, Baba lists, is it 5 or 6, I don't remember exactly, ways to remove Samskaras. You know what chapter I'm talking about? The removal of Samskaras. So one of the ways is presented as restraining Samskaras from expressing themselves. So feeling, recognize, but in order to restrain something from expressing, first you have to notice it's there. Correct? You have to notice what is there, number 1, to recognize it, number 2, know that it's about to be expressed, number 3, and stop it, number 4. I'm going to ask you 2 questions in an effort to get to know your personality. How about that? So, think about this because I think this will help you throughout this presentation today. You will go back and personalize it, and that's the best way to use what I present. So my first question to you is, complete this sentence. My characteristics that I like. So for example, I like the fact that I am often
Happy.
happy. Okay, happy.
Enthusiastic.
Enthusiastic.
Care for others.
Pardon me?
Care for others.
Care for others. My characteristics that I like the fact that I am often
Kind.
kind.
Mindful.
Mindful.
Present.
Laughing.
Okay, this is not a wish list you're giving me, right? This is something that you identify with. That
Jovial.
I am present. I am mindful. This is very important. I mean, it's funny, but it's very important so you can utilize what I'm going to present. Who said something here?
I said laughing.
Laughing?
Yeah.
But you said
Oh,
often,
okay.
not all the time, obviously.
That you're often cheerful, let's
Yeah,
say?
cheerful. Is a
Okay.
Reliable.
I'm sorry?
Reliable and resourceful. 2 R's.
Resourceful. Uh-huh.
Jovial. Jovial.
Jovial. What a group.
Jolly.
Okay. All right.
Well, you did ask for the nice ones. Now you're going to ask for the ones that people don't.
Were you cheating on this?
No.
Did you see this? Okay, so now as Dennis said, my characteristics that I don't like, I do not like the fact that I am often
Too sensitive. Too sensitive.
Judgmental.
sensitive, judgmental,
Procrastinating.
procrastinating,
I was going to get to that later.
Shy.
shy,
You really ought to have people's spouses fill this out. Because not only will they be more honest, but they'll be actually more perceptive.
they will come with a list that opens like that. So I do not like the fact that I am often, anything else?
Negative.
Negative. Okay.
Reserve,
Reserve,
reserve, yeah.
reserve.
Hesitant.
Hesitant,
Resentful.
resentful.
Pushy.
Okay.
Paranoid.
Oh, I enough negative. Thank you. So, do you know that every single aspect has two sides? The positives as well as the not so pleasant. Do you know that? So let's go search for them. Happy. What is the other side of happy?
Sad.
Sad.
No.
You mean the negative?
No, that's not what I mean.
Now, the other
If
side,
you are happy, you think you are happy. I don't see you as happy. I think you are,
Unhappy.
no,
Hyper.
fooling yourself.
Arrogant.
that's right,
What?
fooling yourself.
Fooling yourself.
I don't think you're happy. I think you're fooling yourself. You don't see reality. I am very realistic. Right? Enthusiastic. You're not enthusiastic.
You're annoying.
You're annoying. I care for others.
You're a
You think you
busybody.
care- do you think you care for others?
Do I think I care for others?
No, I didn't ask you anything.
Codependent. Codependent.
Codependent, that's right. You think you care for others? You don't care for others, you're codependent. People take advantage of you. You've been taking advantage of. So both sides, by the way, are true. Every single trait, every single characteristic has two sides. Not happy and sad, but happy. And what's the other side of happy? Is that you're so happy and you have to be happy all the time and you identify yourself, I'm a happy person, that even if something that it requires a different way of approaching, you won't get it. Or you will turn it into happy. You will paint it. You see, every trait is a shade of color. And if you walk around with this shade, anything you see, you paint it in that shade. This is critical. You know why? Because we are born with many, 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 many different selves, many different ways of being. You're telling me just a few of them. You're introducing me to what I call your primary self, your primary way that you walk in the world. You identify with that. You think you are that. And you are, by the way. So if I ask some of your friends, tell me about Keith, they will tell, oh, he's kind of reserved, he's kind of, but they will say it in a positive way. Even if you said it as something you don't like about yourself, because I will introduce you like, it's a bit reserved. So he walks in reserve. I will introduce you, yeah, she cares about others. I mean, she always thinks about others. She's very helpful. She's, So every part of our personality has its own desires, wants, beliefs, and values. Samskaras are expressed through those primary selves. You talk, if you identify yourself as mindful, so let's say mindful. What's the other side of mindful?
Arrogant. Arrogant.
Unaware.
Preoccupied.
Thoughtless?
But you see, if someone is mindful all the time, right? If you think that you're mindful,
They're absent.
Uncouth.
I am mindful.
Can't be mindful.
What is the other side? Where's it?
Unspontaneous.
That's right.
What?
That's exactly right. Unspontaneous. So mindful people, they actually are aware of, they try or you are, aware of your movement or other people's movement, of what's happening, and it takes away spontaneity. Spontaneity is out the window. So spontaneity sits on the other side, and you don't have access of it if you identify as mindful. So when we said the opposite, not the opposite, the other side, you're not aware of it. It goes under. Literally, it goes under. But it doesn't die. It goes under, and instead of dying, it grows without your awareness. Cheerful. Let's go with resourceful. I mean, what can you think of not being great about being resourceful? I'm resourceful. You need something, I'll find it for you. I'll give it to you. I'll research it. I'm resourceful. What's the end result of being resourceful?
You're always looking at the ends as opposed to the means. In other words, you're always looking for a particular result. You're result-oriented, which is often, again, like losing spontaneity. It's cutting yourself off to wider possibilities.
That's one aspect. The other one, if you know Yolanda is resourceful and you don't know something, who are you going to ask? Me. And what am I going to do? I'm going to go find out. So I take on responsibility, being resourceful, identifying with resourceful. So I end up tired. And I end up surrounded by people that don't know, and they expect me to know. or they want me, right? Okay.
Look at all the friends you'll have.
Procrastinating. Let's go on the other side now. Look at all the friends you have. And so what you said, Ken, you identified the purpose we develop personality. We are this, what you said you identify with, because you found out if you're kind, if you're mindful, if you're resourceful, if you're cheerful, if you're present, all of a sudden you're liked. All of a sudden you feel people kind of need you and they will not abandon you. That's exactly right. So the main purpose of developing the primary parts of our personality is so we are liked, we are loved, we are wanted. Because the worst thing that a human being can experience is being dropped, is being rejected. I don't care if you say, no, Baba said you should not react, whether you're liked, you're not liked, you should not react. You have a personality, you react. Whether you realize it or not, you react. We don't like when we are rejected. We don't like it. It's not pleasant when we are abandoned. So this is very critical to understand that we come, and I'm going to show you a diagram here. Okay, here's my diagram. Okay. There are these circles, semicircles. So what happens here is that when we are born, Baba said, we bring past karma from past lives. In the psychological system that I follow, they call it psychic fingerprint. They call it psychic fingerprint because it's unique to you. So we are born already with a set of tendencies from past lives. But we are born vulnerable. All you have to do is look at a child, an infant or young child. They're so open. They're like without skin. There's no defenses. There's a vulnerability. There's an openness. You see, in the American culture, when you talk about vulnerability, immediately what you think? Weakness. In this system, when we talk about vulnerability, we present both sides. The side that is weakness, is fear, is hurt, pain, but also there's another side to vulnerability. If you don't open to your vulnerability, you cannot recognize beauty. You cannot be intimate with someone. You cannot show tenderness. You cannot receive. You cannot be in the energy of being. So vulnerability also has two sides. If you identify, though, with vulnerability, you become a victim to the world. Those are the people that you know, or they come to you, or they come to me, in my profession. One horrible thing happens after another. They are raped, and then they are thieves came, and then they lose. It's amazing what happens because they have not developed claws for the jungle of life. In order to survive, you need claws. Otherwise, you become a victim to everything that comes to you. So, we are born with what's unique. We are born vulnerable, which means open to anything. That's when the selves of this lifetime begin to form through conditioning. So depending what era, what culture, what religion, what kind of personality your parents had, what country, what school, all this play a part in conditioning which will become your dominant primary selves that you identify with. So, for example, I came to this country when I was very young. I was a young teenager. And I'm Greek, so I came from Cyprus, and I was like carefree. My mother will take care of everything, blah, blah, blah. Then my father decides to go back. My mother doesn't speak English. I have a younger sister. Guess who had to become, overnight, the head of the family?
Do we get a prize?
Yes. You don't realize it in the beginning, though. You realize it much later. In the beginning is suffering. That's a very good question, Dennis. You know? So, overnight, because of circumstances, I had to know, to have answers, to go find, so I had to take control. I had to be independent because there was no shoulder to lean on. It was nothing. Otherwise, I'll fall. So circumstances, this is my circumstance. that I develop a primary self that tends to be independent. And independent means, I don't need your help. I'll do it by myself. Like before I went and I took the chair and someone said, oh, you know, our presenter is carrying the chair or something. Because if it was up to me, years ago, I will tell Dennis, no, we'll go and set up the chairs. We'll do it ourselves, you see? It took years. What's on the other side of independent, by the way? What's on the other side that I had to bury?
Reliant.
You were talking about character.
Independent. What's the other side?
Dependence,
Helplessness.
Needy.
Yeah.
Dependent.
Yeah.
Right? So, when my circumstances, I could not afford to be needy. If I was needy, I wouldn't survive. Do you get the picture here? So all of you have a history like that. Whoever you think you are today and you identify with, you had a very good reason. I am talking a good reason to the point of survival reason. That in order to survive the circumstances of your childhood, of your life, you developed into who you are today, into who you identify. If I meet you and I tell you, tell me a little bit about yourself. You know, what kind of person? Oh, I'll tell Robbie, tell me a little bit about her. What, you know. She will use primary self adjectives. The adjectives are about the main part that had to develop. So this is where selves come in. They are necessary. Baba calls them, you talked about the ego before, Baba calls it necessary evil. Right? Because if you don't develop these selves, these claws, if I didn't become independent, and I was expecting my mother, who didn't speak English, and didn't drive, and didn't work, to help me, I wouldn't be here. This is critical. The entire rest of the presentation depends on this. For you to understand, and for you to go back in your head, you don't have to share, in your life, your circumstances, and why what you see as the main part of your personality today, it had very good reasons that it developed. Very good reasons. Even if you don't like it. Because you know, in my work, I have people come to me and say, you know, oh, I'm too independent and, you know, I'm tired. I don't want to be like this anymore. So even if you don't like it, you learn that way, you know, helping others, caring for others, brings results. In me being independent and energetic, it brings results. It works for me. It works for you. But there's a big price to pay. Because the other side had to be buried. So in my situation, neediness went under. So the end result is, when you come to me and I see you're needy, I can't stand you.
Because you're reflecting.
That's how judgment is formed.
Wow.
See your own weakness.
Do you understand why we cannot get away from judgment? We can't. And whoever right now, as you're sitting here, you think of a person that you can't stand, that you are, okay, let me not go that way, okay? You're annoys you. You know, you're like, you know, they could change a little bit. They should, oh, I love it, should. They should be like this, they should be like that. And you're right, Dennis, I should have required spouses to be here as well. Okay? So whenever that comes out, who says that? Your primary self says that. Because when I had to push down needy, it's because that way of being in the world didn't serve me. So I form the belief and the value, being needy doesn't get you much. Doesn't get you a lot of places. It's not serving me. But guess what? You find yourself surrounded by needy. You find yourself marrying or being with someone who has what you have disowned, what had to go under. Because the universe needs harmony. Baba needs harmony. Balance, joint, moving together, right? Is it clear so far?
Yeah.
Does it make sense so far? Is it something that is indigestion for you so far that I said?
Will you discuss, Yolanda, the fact that many people actually manifest the other side of their personality in other areas of their life?
Give me an
In other
example.
words,
You have something in
An
mind.
independent person may be very independent in their career, and they may be very dependent when it comes to finding love, a partner. In
So-
fact, they may attach themselves to people who abuse them. You see this all the time. To give you another example, we see it right now. It's very topical. We see very powerful, very intelligent, primarily men, not only, primarily men, who are doing colossally stupid things sexually, either in the workplace or otherwise, that they know are positively self-destructive, are exactly...
Got it. Got it.
You
And
got
you
it.
got it too. So, what he's talking about is when these parts that subconsciously now we bury and they go under. What did I say before? They don't die. They're alive and they grow. So what happens very often for all of us, whoop, they come up. And when they come up, they don't come up a little bit. They come up big. Big. That's when you hear a story. He was a family man. Oh my God, everybody, in the community, he was just so dedicated and everything he did was about his family. We haven't seen him in a long time. Oh yeah, he left everybody. He bought a convertible, he got a 20-year-old, and off he goes. Okay, why? Because the family man, the father, the husband, was the primary self. Who was disowned? Who was disowned? Who was disowned here? The single guy, right? When you're single, they don't tell us that when we marry, it's a big price we have to pay. They only say good things about marriage. They don't say the other side, that the being single is gone, right? So if there's no expression here as a single man, because all the things that he did, the red convertible, the younger woman, the running away from all responsibility, if a single man does that, nobody will say anything, right? I mean, it's expected to live kind of carefree life. But if a person has lived all his life in this energy of responsibility, so you're talking about responsibility here, the irresponsible goes under. And when it comes up, it destroys lives. Why? Because there's no access. Because both sides have to get access. Why? How did we start this presentation today? We said every trade has
Another side.
two sides.
The other side.
So if you bury a part, you also bury the gifts that that part carries. What are some of the gifts in being single? Independence,
Spontaneity.
spontaneity, being single, and how about, what are the gifts in being irresponsible?
Well, you don't have to also, there's no risk of rejection, emotionally free. You don't have to worry about being hurt.
That's right. Irresponsible. What are the other gifts of being irresponsible?
You worry a lot less.
Huh?
You often worry a lot less.
That's right.
More fun.
That's right.
Instant
That's right.
gratification.
You are irresponsible. That means you're surrounded by responsible caretakers they're so willing to take on that responsibility you're not handling. Because if your primary self, so let's say you identify with irresponsible. Oh yeah, John, oh my God, he's so irresponsible. And usually irresponsible has a negative connotation, right? But I bet you John is more relaxed than you are. So they're both sides. Every trade has two sides. Every single trade. Is it becoming a little bit more clear how personality develops?
Yeah.
Yes?
It says becoming more clear to me, but my question is this written down somewhere?
Yes. This is called the theory of the psychology of selves. And this is a theory I studied for 20 years now. And I studied it with its creators, Hal and Citra Stone, who are in California. So there are many books about this way of seeing, this angle of seeing personality. And to me, being a therapist for 35 years now, studying many different theories, it's the only one that made sense. And it's the only one that I understand Samskaras. So I don't have to divide psychology and spirituality. I understand that Samskara, if each part of us, so if you are, if you're responsible, let's say, right? If your primary self is responsible, what does that mean? What are some of your values and your rules of life if you're responsible?
Reliable.
You're reliable.
Pay your bills on time.
You pay your bills on time.
Assertive.
Okay? All right. So responsible carries very specific set of rules about life. If I'm responsible, I want to pay my bills on time. It becomes a rule. What are Samskaras?
Desires.
Well, I've been reading about Samskaras for 30 years. I still don't know what they are. But I understand, my understanding is that part of the identification...
Yolanda, these folks don't know what Samskaras are.
We don't know what Samskaras are.
I know, John. Be patient. I'll come to that.
Okay.
So we have John and Irene joining us from North Carolina, and they don't know what Samskaras are.
We're old friends.
So Samskaras, when we talk about Samskaras, they're really, Meher Baba talked about Samskaras in terms of their impressions that gather through lifetimes. So everything we do, it becomes an impression, a memory, and gradually it becomes like a habit pattern. And they keep repeating and repeating and repeating. Okay.
Good, bad.
So, but it's a big deal about Samskaras, and I'm not gonna, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, it's said that your Samskaras make up your karma.
Mm-hmm.
Your karma, when you're born with karma, it's basically your work, the work that you have to do this lifetime. So you could say that Samskaras are pieces of your work, basically.
And the most encouraging thing is when I read in the Discourses, in one of the chapters, Discourses is a book, it's a main book that Baba, that you can change your karma, you can adjust it, you can mold it. It was the most encouraging thing I've ever read in the Discourses when Baba says that. So talking about harmony, creating harmony, disharmony happens if you have a personality. So as I'm describing personality, how it's formed, do you start identifying some parts of you that you will consider primary, more than before when I asked the question? Do you? What are some parts?
Responsible.
Responsible?
Yeah.
Responsible, that's right.
Yeah. Reliable. Reliable.
Reliable is part of responsibility. Okay. A lot of us identify with the self of being a pleaser. A pleaser looks around and says,
Where can I
what will make you happy? I'll do it for you. Okay? What will make you happy if I stand still, right? So, and I will do it for you. You see? So, a pleaser always tries to make people happy. What is wrong with that? What can be anything that is not helpful about being a pleaser?
You're not being consistent. I mean, you're not being real.
Bingo.
Displease yourself.
You might be negating of somebody's real experience that of whatever they're feeling in the moment instead of projecting something onto them.
Okay,
Well, you're forgetting about what's going to make you happy.
that's right. So you go under. You go under. If you're a pleaser, two unpleasant things happen. First, you forget your own needs. I know what you want. I know what you make, because all my attention goes into how can I keep you happy and satisfied. All of that goes there. And my actions move according to keeping you happy, right? Which means I forget what I like. I neglect myself, but the worse than that, I
Resentment.
become a liar. I lie. I say yes when I really want to say no. I say, I like your haircut, Steve, when I really don't. Yes,
Is this absolute? I can't see it being absolute.
nothing is absolute.
I cannot fathom any of this
Tony.
as being absolute.
Nothing of what every single word I say today is absolute.
When someone says you want to be pleasing and happy, how can you say you're untrue? What? What are you talking about?
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if I want to please you, Tony, and you come in your blue shirt today, and you say to me, does that look nice with my skin color and all that? And I said to you, oh, it's great. When inside I say, blue is the worst color for Tony. Because in some ways, I don't want to hurt you. You see? So in that way, I am talking pleasing and lying. That's what I'm talking about. But because my effort is so much to please you, I make sure I say what you would like, not truthful to what I feel. Yes?
I think I'm responsible, but I never try to please people in that way. It's make a compliment when I don't feel it.
No. Responsible are not pleasing. They're two
Oh.
very different things.
Oh, but I
Oh,
thought
no.
you should say that
You
your
are
other side is
talking
a
about
pleaser.
a different characteristic.
Uh-huh.
You're talking about a straight talker. Okay?
And
So, a straight talker, that what she
Oh,
said,
okay.
if I don't like something, I will tell you right away. I will not even hide it or even go this way or that way. A straight talker, it's great, always honest, right? What is the other side of a straight talker?
They can be extremely hurtful people.
There you go. Okay? They can be extremely hurtful people without even realizing, because Baba said, I should be honest. I'm honest. I'm telling you the truth. I always say the truth. You
Well,
see?
but he
So
also
you see?
said, don't hurt
So
somebody's heart.
basically what we're doing here is honoring that every trait of the personality has two sides. And whatever you identify with, you think everybody should be this way, whether you realize it or not. And by the way, that is a judgment. Judgments don't always, they're not always about, oh, he's horrible. I can say, oh my God, he's a wonderful man. That's a judgment. Yes,
Well, not to digress, but I think it's right on
but you are
subject.
going to digress.
Not if it's right on subject, two of the things that I've strive to practice in my spiritual practice is to find a balance where I can know the difference between reacting and finding a balance between expressing and repressing. That's the first point. And that takes a lot of effort. The other is that sometimes it seems that we can exercise that honesty when we bring the qualities of, say, subtlety to the honesty. We're less hurtful. When we are more specific, instead of just generally, well, you're being like this, as opposed to being specific. So subtle, specific, and sensitive. So if we add those qualities, our honesty becomes something else. It doesn't have to be, it can be very direct, but it doesn't have to be hurtful.
What is your name?
Paul.
Paul?
Yeah.
So Paul, thank you for that.
Yeah.
You are describing another primary self. The primary self of being able to know how, because that takes skill to be subtle, to be sensitive, to think, to take a little step. Would this hurt Paul? Would this, how would I say this to Paul? That takes skill. And that is another primary self. The ability, so one person can do that like that. Another person, Paul, not in this lifetime. Not in this lifetime. I have people coming to me for therapy for 10 years. They didn't change one bit. You know why? Because, in one of Don Stevens' books, I don't know if you've read it, it's called, I think the title is Some Results. He writes one sentence that I just love. He says, there are concentrated areas in each lifetime. There are concentrated areas. God, Baba, gives us concentrated areas to work on. And a lot of other areas not in this lifetime. And we have to honor that because it's so true. So in my practice, I get people, and after a few sessions, after a few months, after a few years, when I see something we're focusing on is not even adjusting, nothing, I honor that. And I say, that's one of those areas, not in this lifetime. Let's look at something else. Because to go and try to change something that is not meant to change. And how do you know that? All those New Year resolutions we put, and every year is the same one, and the same one, and the same one. You should get a hint that that's one of the areas that's not going to change.
And we get a lot of, in this culture, we have a lot, especially now with this life coaching and be the best you can be and be perfect. It's very popular now, and I think that could backfire sometimes. Trying to do everything.
Well, because there is a total ignorance about primary selves and the strength and the roots and the force of samskaras. Because every samskara, every primary self, every samskara is expressed through the wants and desires of your primary self. So, your samskara, you are saying, oh, no, I never lie. Whatever I want in my mind, I will say it. That's your samskara. That's your primary self. So your primary self of straight talker expresses the samskara of always saying whatever is in your mind.
I've worked on that a lot. My mother did that. So
Yeah.
my mother did that a lot. I've worked on it. I rather say nothing. I don't always say what I think.
I'm using it.
No,
I don't
know,
mean
I
you.
know.
I'm using the example you gave me because it's a great example. Because a lot of people are either pleasers and they think, oh, no, I don't want to be a pleaser anymore. I want to be a straight talker. But you go from one jail to the other jail.
Yeah.
Because if you are operating out of these primary selves, you're asleep. Your whole world becomes only what are the rules of this direction. So if I'm independent, all the rules is I have to do it by myself. I can do it. I don't need anybody's help. These are my values. These are my beliefs. This is a jail. It means I have no choice. I can never say, can you please help me? I can never say, I don't know how to do it. I will feel shame to say that. If I say, can you please help me? I will feel shame. I will feel guilt. So every time you experience shame or guilt, it's because your part that was under, which we call disowned part, came out and was present and broke the rule of the primary self. That is how judgments are formed, outer or inner. When judgment goes inwards, we have fatal inner critics. We put ourselves down. We doubt ourselves. That's when if I am independent and I did something needy and dependent, I depended on you for something, I will feel, the other part of me, will feel shame. And it will punish me with guilt and shame. That's my punishment. Or if I see someone else and I see they are needy, oh, please, they cannot do anything by themselves. Immediately the judgment comes out. So are you starting to get the challenge of being in any relationship? Because, by the way, whenever we find, whether it's a friend, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a part of our family, any kind of relationship, especially when it's partners that but even we are born into families, someone is the exact opposite. Sometimes, don't you meet some people and it's like, what? Your siblings? You grew up in the same family? And they are the exact opposite, right? Because the energy in the family has to be balanced, which means if, let's say, you're born into parents who are primary selves are independent. No, let me choose a different. Intellectual. The information is important to them. Rational thinking, clear thinking is important to them. So both of them are intellectual. So that's their primary self, right? What did they disown? What's on the other side?
Emotion.
Emotion. So on the other side, any emotion is under. Is not talked about, is not asked about, nothing, right? So they give birth to you, and guess what is your primary self? Emotional. So you see, very, very young, you have two choices. Either to be emotional and feel that you're not liked, you're judged. Because if those parents are not in touch at all with their emotions, that means they expect everybody to think, forget emotions, put away the emotions, think clearly. And by the way, that is true, by the way. By the way, if you are very intellectual and you put emotions aside, the thinking becomes very clear. Emotions come in, they muddle things. But emotion is part of being human. So a family, an intellectual family gives birth to an emotional child, that child will not feel rewarded if they show too much emotion. So they might develop intellectual, but it's not there. They didn't come with that, you see. They didn't come with that. Where is my diagram here? So down here, they did where we come with karma from past life. That was their karma, to be emotional, right? And you're born now, you're vulnerable, you want to belong, you want your parents to love you, to reward you, And your emotional, up here, your emotional, right? This goes up, your emotional, you develop, you know, that doesn't go anywhere. And you start developing a part that is not really you. It's a lot of suffering. A lot of parents have serious problems with their children because guess what? Sooner or later, if you identify all the time with one part, sooner or later, the disowned part will come find you. Why? Because in the universe, because Baba tells us it's the embrace of everything, of every trait. So in that effort, if you're only on one side, you will give birth to them, you will marry them, they will work for you, you will work for them. They will come find you. And that's a sign. So think of all the people you judge that you don't like. What about them? That one specific characteristic is it that you don't like?
Maybe it's something in yourself that you don't
Yeah.
like.
That something in
mirroring.
yourself is what you buried.
Yeah.
You see? Is what you buried because it didn't serve you and you buried it. And when you see it outside, you judge it. Because what happens, if we bury an energy in us, a self in us, when we see it in someone else, that energy starts to vibrate. And in an effort to put it down, we judge. We kill the other person with words, with looks. There's many, many ways of killing people.
Just avoid it.
Avoidance, anything.
So what is the solution? How can we...
Well, first, I want you to
really
understand.
think.
First, I want you to understand disharmony. Because if you don't understand disharmony, it's no way you will have, because you have a personality. You have samskaras.
Yeah.
You have dharma
Stuck with
from
it.
another, okay?
Yeah.
But so if you start, so the first level of solution is to understand that.
See, I used to think, when I first came to Baba, everything should be love. Baba lovers should be love, or any spiritual community. And being around different spiritual communities, there's a lot of discord, people that gossip or do things that you would think are unspiritual, anger. All the things you would think would not be part of a spiritual community. I've realized it's taken me a while that the shadow, I think Carl Jung used the term shadow, which is
The disowned self.
that part of ourself that we don't want to look at, the negative, and just has to come out. And a lot of times, especially with spiritual communities, you would think, wow, why is everybody so messed up? It's a spiritual community, what's going on? And I've realized just recently that it's part of, I don't want to say part of Baba will, but it's necessary. Because I've looked at Baba and said, what's going on with this community of lovers? Or why is there so much conflict or suffering and distress or anti-spiritual behavior, that's so to speak? And intuitively, he's told me the shadow, he brings that up. It doesn't give us an excuse to just, I'm going to do something bad because that's what he wants. It doesn't give me an excuse to do that, but in a way, it's going to happen.
So, Steve, brilliant, what you said. Because one of the primary selves is what I call the spiritual self. So a spiritual self, I'm not talking about spirituality here. When you develop a spiritual self as a primary self, then I don't care where, Baba community, Christians, Jews, it doesn't matter what, okay? If you develop a spiritual self for that community, you have all the rules how one should be. The minute your rules have hardened and they became written in stone, you are in a primary self. If you are in a primary self, what did I say? You are asleep. The only solution here, and the most important thing you said, if I'm like love, honesty, no, all those rules of a spiritual primary self, what happens? You actually start to invite like a magnet, the darkness. The darkness. It becomes, you said it's nothing absolute. In this kind of equations, it's absolute. You become this, this crusade for the good, what Baba said, what Baba said, what Baba said. But then it almost loses its honesty, its authenticity, and it becomes a rule. Then, that's what happened. Then, the disowned selves, or maybe of the same person, start to come out. Remember what I said before? If you disown, if you bury this other side, it doesn't mean it's dead. So, going back, what's the solution? Okay, so now what? Now we know this, let's solve this, right? Okay, so it's not that easy. It's no solution. It's no, one of the things that I've been working, I am telling you for 25 years. When I said to you before, independent was my primary self. And whenever I saw a needy person, I couldn't stand them. I really couldn't. Who comes to therapy? A needy person comes to therapy. I will get a needy client. I couldn't stand them. Oh, and my treatment plan and my purpose of therapy, what do you think will be? To make them independent. You see, it was all my primary self will dominate and say what that person should do. It took me years and years and years to do what? To access my neediness. To see the other side, the positive side of being needy. You ask for help? That's the positive side of being needy. And if you bury needy, you bury asking for help. And you're exhausted all the time. Not only that, you end up surrounded by needy people. Because you become a magnet. If you are stuck on a particular primary self, spiritual self, you become a magnet of the opposite. And all you have to do is look at your lives. Look around. So, in accessing this other, and it's not intellectual, you see, right now I don't have any other choice, but I'm presenting. I am giving you words which are intellectual, right? We are doing an intellectual presentation, so I'm describing it on the rational level. This work, though, there are many, many methods that you can move that. One of the methods that I use is called voice dialogue. And this method, so let's say I go to therapy and I'm tired now, I'm exhausted. I don't want to be independent anymore. But I cannot do it any other way. Like you said, you can be subtle. But subtle is a whole different primary self. That if someone who's not subtle, and subtle is actually, you know what? Subtle is one of my disowned selves. That's very interesting that you chose that. Very often I have very difficult time being subtle. Whatever I say, I say it. The wrong time, the wrong way, to the wrong person, and it gets me into trouble. So in learning, first of all, I had to become aware that I'm not subtle, that that's a disowned self. So some of my good friends are very subtle. You see, I attract subtle people. But then I judge them, you're not honest. You're not telling me exactly what you think. Because they're subtle. I'm expecting them to be like me. Just blurt it out, say it. You see? So what happens in this method, I will invite the independent. I will say, okay, Yolanda, so let's say I'm there. Okay, let me speak to the independent. And actually, the chair, you will move the chair, you will actually move. And me, as a facilitator, let's say I'm speaking to another person, who let's call responsible. So responsible, I don't want to be responsible, you come to me for help, and I do this method, I will say, okay, let me speak to that part. So you have to move, though, from where you're sitting. So you sit somewhere else. Something happens when you physically move. I don't know what. But actually the energetic vibration of that responsible, it's there in all its glory. And I start to talk to the responsible part, let's say of Mary. Mary's there, she's complaining about being responsible, tired. I said, let me speak to the responsible. And I hear the history, why she had to become responsible. The suffering, why she had to become responsible. And that energy is being seen by me without any judgment. You see, that's the key. Not to pretend, because a lot of people say, no, I don't judge. I'm not judgmental. Oh, really? You're totally unaware. That those people are more dangerous than people that go around and say, yeah, I'm judgmental. Those are the dangerous people. Or the other people that say, if we have a conflict, well, let's forgive and forget. Forgive and forget. That is a dangerous statement. Because nothing is forgiven and nothing is forgotten. It's not. You just open the carpet and you put it under. All right? So I speak to the responsible. That energy is seen. So when Mary moves here, for the first time in her life, she feels the separation of that vibration. In here now, she's a tiny little bit not identifying with responsible. So now I'm entering the experiential part, the energetic part, that is impossible for me to teach. You see, it needs to be experienced. And when I was receiving facilitations to separate from my independent, that's what happened. My independent was finally seen and appreciated, and it calmed down. It calmed down. For the first time, I was seen. I was appreciated for the suffering and the work that I had to do to survive as an independent. So when I move here, there's some space now to look and see that being needy, it's lighter. It's lighter. And then when I move back, now I have a choice in my life. A few things I want to say here, okay? So now, here, I'm creating a new space in my psyche. Here, I know the gifts and the limitations of being independent, the gifts and the limitations of being needy. Here. Now I have a choice. Paul, when you tell me at the end of the presentation, we have to put the chairs away, I have a choice. I don't have to rush and help you when I'm already exhausted. I have a choice to say, no, I really don't want to do it, or can you wait, or can we have someone help us? You see, many choices. But if I reside in the energy of independent, I don't even think that I have a choice to say, let's ask someone to help us. I don't even think that. Any comments? So far.
I have a comment, and it sort of makes me laugh, because I have always been the very independent person, along with other things. And now, because of my age and my physical limitations, I can no longer be independent on a lot of things. And it's like your example of the chair. 10 years ago or 5 years ago, if somebody said, oh, we have to move the chairs, I'm right in there doing it. Now I can't do it. And it's funny. I mean, I'm just seeing that, oh, wow. I've moved, I've been forced to move. And I can see that in a lot of areas in my life.
There you go. And you're bringing up an amazing area of older age, where our body now, not our mind, not our energy, not our will, our body is forcing us to move differently. And I've seen older people suffer because they refuse. The primary self of independent refuses. So in New York, I bought this incredible piece of land, a beautiful upstate New York with woods and ponds, and you will never think New York looks like that. I bought it from a man who was 76, and he identified with being independent. And in this land, there are maybe, I don't know, 6, 7 areas. Each area is like, I don't know, 5, 6 acres each. And he insisted to go with his tractor and cut the grass. And now he's 76. He has arthritis. He refused to ask a neighbor to help him. He saw this piece of paradise because he refused to ask for help. You see, I mean, these selves, when they dominate and we refuse there is not recognition. So, what is the first step? The first step is to identify who you don't like. So think of someone. So I'm going to ask you now some other questions. I'm going to ask you 2 different questions now, if I find them. So here we go. So here's the question. Characteristics that others' characteristics. Okay, let's start with this. Others' characteristics that I like so much, not me, others. I wish that I could be more like them. So think of characteristics you admire in someone else. You don't think you possess them, but when you see them, you're just like, oh my God. It's one of those like this. That kind of adoration where you feel less, actually. That's how much you admire them, right? So give me one.
Articulate.
Pardon me?
Articulate.
Articulate. Articulate.
Confident.
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 Confident. Confident. Let's stay with these 2. Confident and articulate.
Easygoing.
Okay, easygoing. So, articulate, confident, easygoing. These characteristics are also part of your disowned self. Are parts that you haven't really developed to the point that to your satisfaction. So you see that all this time now, I talked about if you see a part in someone else that you pressed down, that you judge, it's the other side too. You adore them. You fall in love with them. You want to marry them. You see? So it can go both ways. By the way, thank God it's like that. So we can find a spouse. Because what we actually get attracted, if we're on the lookout for a spouse, what we're attracted to, the first thing is, yes, of course, it's physical and but, and maybe what we have in common, copies, which is nothing, they say nothing about relationship, is how they are different than us. How they walk around confident in areas that we have underdeveloped. So we fall in love with them. We marry them, and then we want to kill them. So those are the situations where you fall in love. So I am just energetic, and I fall in love with a man, let's say, who's more kind of laid back and more kind of centered and easygoing. And it's like, oh yeah, when I'm with him, I'm able to kind of slow down. And then after a few years, it's like, you're not moving fast enough. You see? Then what we fell in love with, we see the other side. And that's how conflict develops. So do you see the importance of recognizing your primary self. Because if you know your primary self, you can predict your judgments. And if you can predict what you're going to judge, it gives you the luxury to use restraint. You see? It's the only way to use restraint. If you can predict, if you know what judgments you usually carry. And that depends on who your primary self is. Which parts of you went under and why.
I have a question. I may have not heard you say that, but as a primary self, can you have like either a co-primary self or a subdivision
Yes,
of?
yes, that's a very good question.
Because
Yeah.
it seems like, I don't know, I'm just thinking Ayurvedic or whatever, there's like a co.
No, you see,
You know?
I only have 3 hours.
Right.
Usually I teach the course 36 hours,
Right.
okay? So this is a 36 hours presentation.
What's the name of this theory again?
Psychology of the selves. Not self-psychology. Psychology of the selves. The theory of the psychology of the self. So, when I say your primary self, I have been mentioning only one for reasons of simplicity. But usually it's a group of them. Okay? So if my independent is in my primary self, I need an organizer, responsible, planner. I need all these helps, you know, so we are a group. And on the other side is the needy, the laid back, the not responsible. That's a group. Now, before you, Steve, you talked about ego. So in the traditional way, psychology was presented as having an ego. We have an ego, one ego, the captain of the ship, right? Well, in this way of looking at personality, we have many egos. We have many egos. This is a group of them that have running our ship, that drive our car. So it's like, you see, so what I described before in terms of recognizing them, and believe it or not, the fastest way to identify one of your primary selves is to actually find out who you don't like. It's amazing, because who you don't like, the opposite is your primary self. And who you don't like is your disowned self. So in identifying that, you know who you usually, your karma, the conditioning of this lifetime, all these play a part in becoming who you are today. And you have to honor it and respect it. Then that will give you an idea who you buried and why, and who you're going to judge or fall in love with. And then, when you know the positives and negatives, you create this new space. They call it aware ego process. This new space in your psyche, you see, naturally does not carry judgment. But not because you're trying not to be judgmental. Here, I am not judgmental, I'm trying, I'm working hard. This is a primary self talking. Here, I hold both. And naturally, I know being independent is helpful and is not. Being needy is helpful and is not on certain circumstances, you see. Here now, not only there is no judgment, but there is an opening to vulnerability, but not as a victim. Okay? So here, where's my thing? So, here we talked about we come in the world with our karma, what we brought from other past lives. We're vulnerable. And if we identify with this, you're going to be a victim. Then we form selves depending what worked for us, right? These selves become so good that they bury vulnerability. we no longer feel our vulnerability. You see, being vulnerable, having selves, having the clause we talked about before, makes you able to say, I don't know. As simple as that. To say, I don't know, requires vulnerability. Because in saying, I don't know, you're vulnerable. You don't know everything. You see, being here, it says, it makes you able to say, wait. This was my part in this conflict. In order to, if you have a conflict with someone, for you to say, this is what I did wrong, requires vulnerability. So vulnerability opens once you create this new place that you see the worth, both the gifts and the limitations of both selves, but they don't dominate you. You're not acting out of them. And you start a relationship. So now I have a relationship with my independent. I talk to myself. I talk to my independent. I said, Yolanda, no, you're not doing that. Yolanda, ask for help. You see, there is that's why it's called voice dialogue. So the goal of this whole thing is to identify who you are and to develop a relationship with these selves. And from here, naturally, there's no judgment. But it's not a part where, okay, all right, I'm in, we already got process, I'm in it. It doesn't work like that, okay? Because then it becomes another part to be. So it moves, it's in constant movement. So here, in my experience, there's an opening, and approaching spirituality from here is very different from the spiritual self. Because here is about not knowing. It's not about, Baba said that, that's what it means. Baba said that, that's what that means. That's what, oh no, that's not what it means. I'll tell you what it means. It's no such thing here. Here, you accept not knowing. And that opens the door to go somewhere. You know, for me, spirituality is often is not found under bright lights and serenity. It's not. At least that's my experience. It's found in darkness and in suffering. And Pat, do you remember the last time you walked in a dark room, no lights? You walk in and you don't see anything. You see nothing. But if you stay long enough, what happens?
You see.
You're starting to see.
Those will become more sensitive.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right. But where is that courage to stay in the darkness? To stay in the unknown? You see, that's very vulnerable. So the primary self rushes in to give us the answers. And what answers does the primary self give? Depending who they are. If they are responsible, they will say the responsible thing to that. Oh, the biggest, what do you think is the personality of the states? Like, this also works with nations, you know. What's the personality of the states?
Donald Trump.
What did you say?
Personality
Pride.
of the US.
What's the personality of the states?
Pride.
Pride, pusher, bigger,
Arrogance.
better,
Arrogance.
Powerful.
loud,
That's
right?
Loud, yes.
Right?
No.
That's the
States.
primary
US.
self of the states.
Of the state.
What's the
US.
primary self of Germany?
Well, there's self-righteous, I guess. Or
Resourceful.
serious.
Organized, on time.
Resourceful.
The primary self of Germany, resourceful. How about perfectionist?
Oh, yeah, perfection.
They have
That's
good
the
cars.
worst. It's the worst.
They know how to make cars because they're perfectionists,
And
right?
sausages.
So Germany, if you want to put everything together, is if you want the primary self of a
that's
nation,
terrible,
is
yeah.
perfectionist. What's the primary self of Australia? You
Freedom.
knew I was going there.
I knew you were going there.
What's
Freedom.
the primary self of Australia?
Free spirit.
Uncouth.
Oh, really?
How do you say that?
What did you say?
Uncouth.
Like wild.
Wild? And is that what that means? I never heard that word. It's Australian, I guess. Okay.
It's-
What did you say, John?
Free.
Free. Yeah.
Uncensored.
Uncensored. Would you
Laid
agree,
back.
my Australian friends?
Wild.
Some of them.
Some of them.
Laid back.
Laid back, that's right. That's right. Also, another primary self in Australia is they believe, correct me if I'm wrong, okay, that, you know, here in the States, bigger, arrogant, louder, our head has to be above everything. In Australia, they think whatever head is on top, it's the one cut first. Right?
Tall poppy syndrome.
Okay.
Undermine.
Ah, exactly.
Undermine.
Saddle.
Yeah.
Okay, go under the radar. Right? What's the primary self of Greeks?
Yeah, that's what I wanted.
What is the primary self of Greeks?
Explosive.
Cheerful, happy, flamboyant. Explosive is one of them, John. Yeah, definitely. But also it's laid, actually, believe it or not, it's laid back.
Laid back.
I mean, if you go to
Very laid
Greece,
back.
watch how people sit in the cafe, how they sit in that chair. They become one with the chair. It's amazing. I enter the country and I feel relaxed without having to do anything really.
Let's all go to Greece.
So, so do you, and by the way, that's how wars start. So we talked in the small scale here between people, primary selves, disowned selves, fighting, judging. If you take it a step further, well, a few steps further, that's how wars begin. I mean, look what countries are fighting with other countries. So it's really primary selves fighting disowned selves. So let me go to this question. So we talked about others' characteristics that you like, and it's still a disowned self, but you like, right? So now, others' characteristics that you don't like. I am glad that I'm not often, what? Late. So what's the gift of being late?
Being prompt.
What's the gift of being late?
Oh, the gift of
Relaxed.
Relaxed.
Lazy.
Everything is set, and you go late. Everything is set for you.
Convenient.
Convenient. It's
Lazy.
convenient.
Lazy. Oh, yeah.
So, but do you see? I mean, it's funny, but there is actually another side to being late. Let me just say some more about this.
Open to spontaneity
Well,
or spontaneous.
Open to spontaneity. That's right. So,
getting attention.
what about rude?
Rude?
Rude, mean. Okay? That's a quality that usually most of us don't like. Instead of rude, what we
Courageous.
should be? Considerate, tactful,
Right.
right? But the person, so Steve, you called me rude, right? I would say to you, no, I'm not rude. I am direct and honest. And you think you're tactful and considerate? No. You're wimpy. Do you see? So tactful on one hand, what's the other side of tactful? And considerate, you're always considerate. That means you're easy kind of, okay, all right. You see? I mean, wimpy is kind of negative, but do you see the other side of tactful, of considerate?
Sneaky.
Selfish, go ahead.
Sneaky.
Sneaky. So, what's the other? Sneaky usually is like, oh, don't put to be sneaky.
Cowardly.
So what's the other side of sneaky?
Thank you.
The positive side of sneaky.
Open,
What are the
honest.
gifts of being sneaky? the gifts of being sneaky.
Cleverness.
That's right. You kind of, the wheels are turning. How can I get Paul to give me a cup of coffee? He's drinking one. What can I say?
Manipulative.
You see, I get what I want.
Yeah.
I make it happen. These are useful skills in life. These are useful skills. But we all, a primary self will think sneaky and will only think, a primary self of honest, let's say, will think sneaky, it's not good. But sneaky has its gifts. How about selfish? So, Jenny, you call me selfish. Yolanda, you're selfish. And I would say, and you would say, you shouldn't be selfish. You will be giving and you will be thoughtful of others. And I would say, I'm not selfish. I'm self-caring.
Self-responsible.
And you think you're giving? No. You're a pushover. Do you see what I'm saying? Even selfish has another side. Because if you were, by the way, if you were not selfish, you wouldn't be here today to learn something new for yourself. Well, I thought that's what you thought you were getting, right? Right? So selfish, it doesn't mean me. It means, I'm thirsty. I'm going to get up and get some water, even if it will disturb a little bit the circle. It can come down to a small gestures like that. Yes?
Well, just that, and trying to be the not selfish person, you're vulnerable to being manipulated by the sneaky and needy person. How dare you not do that for me? You know I need you to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What kind of a selfish person are you that you won't help me out?
Yeah.
Again and again and again.
Mm-hmm. But you see, I'm using selfish because in most circles, not only in Baba circles, but selfish is a bad thing to be. But if you don't have a drop of selfishness, you cannot take care of yourself. Literally, you cannot take care of your body, of your needs, of basic needs. Yeah. What about pushy, bossy? I'm not a pushy person. I'm a leader. You think I'm pushy? I'm not a pushy person. No, you shouldn't be pushy. You should be accommodating. You don't understand? You need to be accommodating. You need to be cooperative. You think you're cooperative? You have no opinions of yourself. You're a pushover again. You see how it goes? I'm using these silly examples to really help you understand that it doesn't matter what the primary self is. It has two sides. But if you get stuck in that and the other side goes under, then judgments come. And judgment is the fastest way to disharmony. We're talking about harmony today, right? But I made this big deal first defining disharmony. Because first you need to understand how disharmony is formulated to have any chance to handling it. Because disharmony comes more natural than harmony, in case you didn't notice. If you carry personality, if you have samskaras, if you don't understand the formation of judgment, you're doomed. Doomed meaning what? You will get into conflicts. And then it's, one of the worst situations is convincing yourself, I'm not judgmental. And even worse than that, oh, Baba, I'm not judging. Baba doesn't want me to be judgmental. No, I'm not judging. And you swallow, because they don't go anywhere. If you don't like something, it doesn't go anywhere. You swallow it. The body can only tolerate that much. We get sick. I'm telling you, we get sick notice you judged, and you realize after this brilliant presentation here today, you're all going out and know that judgment is not necessarily an evil thing. Judgment is part of you that you don't want anymore, and you don't have to ever want it, you see. You know what? I will never become needy. I said to you, I embrace my neediness and I can ask for help, but I will never identify myself as needy. It's not going to happen in this lifetime. But at least I have access of that, which immediately cuts my judgments in half. Immediately, if I see a needy person and I can't stand them, I know why. And if you know why you judge, I'm telling you, the judgment, it's like a balloon. When you let the air out, that's how it goes down. Yes?
From what I've understood, and you're sort of jump-starting my latent desire to really go deep into understanding what Samskaras are. And I think Bob has given us such a great gift through the discourses and through this explanation of what Samskaras are, and the key to balancing Samskaras is to balance the opposites. And you're describing these primary selves, buried selves. What you're describing is basically opposites. And it's in the balancing of the opposites that there's equanimity, that there's harmony, that there's poise. It doesn't mean that they go away. It's just that we have a different approach to them. And I just want to bring up one. I read a lot of scriptures, the ones that move me from time to time. I bring them out and they read them, and they sort of breathe new life into my awareness. And one of them two I'll mention. One of them is from the Vedas, which is one of the most ancient scriptures there is. And there's one statement in the Vedas that is somewhat primary to everything that you're sharing here. And Baba, is that as soon as there is another, the experience of other, fear arises. And so much of the judgments and disharmonies that we're talking about in living are based on this otherness, this separate self-sense. And why did Baba make statements like, you and I are not we but one? Why did those come over and over? It's because this primary condition of separation is at the core of so many of these qualities. And just one last thing is one other scripture that I've read many times in my life is I think it's the third patriarch of Zen, and it's a long scripture, but just the first sentence is so powerful. First couple sentences. The first sentence is, the great way is not difficult for those that have no preferences. As soon as we measure what we like versus what we don't like, when we measure what we don't like against what we like against what we don't like is the disease of the mind. It's that, once again, it's that separate self-sense. And, Baba, I keep coming back to discourses, and I see that Baba is describing what Samskaras are, but he's also giving us the recipe, so to speak, of balancing the opposites. And you're bringing it really home from a psychological perspective of, if you don't see what your very primary selves are, you're going to keep manifesting the opposite, or keep attracting yourselves to those that express those qualities that are basically the buried parts of ourselves, Balance.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on. What I'm bringing to you today is just basically another angle, from the psychological angle. And this is the only theory, and I've studied many theories, that made sense to me.
Right.
That really didn't go against, that has a soul, that, and there is a connection with Samskaras, identical almost, you see? And this when I am talking about, through the method of voice dialogue that we're not going to do here today, but I just described, when you reach a point that energetically you separate, we have what Erich, those of you that were there and saw the film yesterday, he talked about effacement. Okay? So effacement is not identifying with anything. He said, we are nothing. But be very careful, because when you take that, I am nothing, it can become a primary self. You see how tricky they are, sneaky. How sneaky these tendencies are. That now, yes, I am nothing. No, I am nothing. You met people like that, I'm nothing. Well, but then there's these rules of being nothing. But from this part, when you separate these energies, you're actually nothing. You're experiencing it. You don't label it. You don't talk about it. It comes from a different place, you see. Now, thank you for sharing that. That was beautiful. Thank you, Paul. You have more to share?
Yes, just on the question of judgmentalness. I noticed myself, so much of my life, I judge judgment. It's a stance, in a sense. I judge it in myself and I judge it in others. Whereas it's really a practice, it's an ongoing practice, so to speak, where it's like, okay, how do I seek to become more judgmental? It's not by judging judgmentalness in myself or others. It's by, well, to put it simply, balancing the tendency within myself to do either.
Well, understanding that judgment, what did I say? What I said in the
Yeah.
very beginning, embracing disharmony, embracing judgment. And if you judge, listen to your judge. Do you know most of us, we talk and we don't hear what we say?
Right.
Do you know that? Most of the time we don't hear what we say. So if you judge, listen to your judgment and learn from it. The way that I presented it today, actually, when you hear yourself either judge someone else or criticize yourself, learn from it. You will learn more of which parts of you need balancing. Now, I want to make one distinction here. Let me make a distinction between judgment and discernment.
And what?
Discernment.
Discrimination.
Okay? Discernment. So it's one, so I'm going to do a little exercise here, okay? So I'm going to strike a pose, and you're going to look at me, and then I'm going to ask you what you saw, okay? All right. That's the pose.
Astonishment.
Judgment.
Surprise.
Surprise.
Judgment.
Wonder.
Judgment.
Oh,
Judgment. What did you see?
Immobility.
Close.
What did she say?
So
Immobility.
your mouth open, your eyes open, your hands spread out.
That's discernment. You see, that's the difference. When we see something, immediately
Interpretation.
the primary self goes in and tells you, I know what that is. Right?
So it's
Discernment
interpretation.
is just describing no judgment, no value attached to it. And it's very difficult. Why is it difficult? because of the presence of the primary selves. That they always have an idea, they always have a belief, they always know what is right. So this balance that we're talking about, it's impossible to always be in balance. It's actually the ability to notice when you're not in balance. To notice yourself going either this way, to bring yourself back. This way, like the ship. What do they call it?
Ballast.
Yes.
Or keel.
Ballast, yeah. They have in the ship that it shows when it's off. That is what this is about. So it's not about not having a primary self. It's not about eliminating disowned. It's none of that. We come with karma from past lifetimes. We bring the Samskaras. We have to form personality. But if you understand what this is about, you will not be afraid of your judgments or what Paul said, judging judgment. And it gives so much more room in relationships. So when you're in the middle of disharmony, you stop. But you see, in order to stop, when you are, so think, this is what I'll do. Think of your life situation right now. Someone you are in disharmony with, or recently, even if it's 2 years ago. Someone you described yourself, you're in disharmony with. Think of it.
But isn't disharmony a judgment as well? I'm just trying to...
Exactly.
So even
Steve.
the fact that we're even, saying that, supposedly what is, it's an interpretation of, because even hearing what Baba said about Hitler, so many people think of Hitler as evil. I've heard it attributed to Baba that he did work. It was actually a universal work that he did for the good. So, we think of what we think of evil or what we think of disharmony or uneven or might be, it's an interpretation.
So my first thing that I said is living in harmony means embracing the existence of disharmony. That's the first sentence I said today. Living in harmony means embracing the existence of disharmony. And then I said, embracing the existence of disharmony becomes easier when one understands the anatomy of judgment. Understanding the anatomy and the role of judgment enables one to live in harmony.
So embracing the existence of disharmony?
That's right, exactly what you said. Stop judging disharmony. Stop judging disharmony.
So it may not even be disharmony, really, if you're saying.
Well, I am saying that, these are key words, harmony, disharmony, especially, with the work. But so what I'm saying to you, disharmony exists. And if you try to avoid it, that means you're pushing parts of yourself down that either they will make you sick or they will bring more people, what you were describing before, they will bring the opposite. Yes?
What I'm getting from this little segment right there is that disharmony can be a friend to us. A tool. We recognize this is a harmonious situation. Aha! What's causing it, and it can lead us to wake up. And
you see, you can be even more simple than that. This is a disharmony. What is your name?
Anne.
Anne? So me and Anne are in disharmony. We're just, I can't stand. Oh my God, you don't believe what you did and what you said. And I'm in disharmony, and I'm with you, and I'm fighting. All I have to do is first, exactly what you said. This is disharmony. What is my role in it?
Right.
That's it. It sounds so simple, it's almost impossible.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because we are in the self. If you are in a primary self with no awareness, you're in it. Remember what we said? These parts have beliefs. And if it's gonna kill me, I'm gonna prove you wrong. If it's gonna kill me, I'm gonna prove you wrong. That means I'm closed in my disowned self. For me to say, what is my part is what Paul said before. You need some separation. If I'm not able to separate from my primary self, I am not able to say, what is my part? And the number one requirement is awareness, is to notice, is to wake up. Remember I said when you're a primary self, you're asleep. We are asleep. We think this is how we go, always. This is the same way, this is the same way, this is the same way. This is what we go. That's wrong. This is the way. You see, we are asleep. But in order to say to you, we are in disharmony, what is my part? That requires vulnerability. That requires me to separate from my primary self, to access some vulnerability. Because just the question, what is my part in this, is a vulnerable stance. Power is to be, it's all your fault. If you didn't do this, if you did this, we wouldn't be in this mess. But these are primary selves talking. In order for me to be, what is my part, I have to separate. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to make the point that what that state of vulnerability allows is to empathize with the disowned self in the other person, or with your own disowned self in that person.
Because what our disagreement is, she is acting like my disowned self. So if I separate from my primary self and I access some of my disowned self, I will understand you. Mm-hmm. And that, my friend, is how forgiveness is done. Because if you understand this, guess what? You don't even need forgiveness. Forgive you for what? For having a primary self? What is the forgiveness about? I've been judging you because I'm standing here and you're acting out of there. But if I access that part of me, I understand it in you. What is it to forgive? Forgive ourselves because we have personalities? Because we have karma? What is it to forgive? It's really about waking up. Wake up. And unfortunately, only crisis wakes us up. Suffering, really, not pretend suffering, we're talking suffering, wakes us up. Well, I don't know about you, that's how I woke up. Crisis, suffering, boom. And think, I'm very serious, think of areas you have conflict right now, people you have conflict with. And if you start thinking about what is my part, how is that person, what I can stand about that person, how is that underdeveloped in me? Because that's exactly what's going on. What I can stand in them, it's underdeveloped in me. Underdeveloped, that means it went under. Didn't have chance to develop.
I think our mind, our brain at least, is always looking for patterns. And how does this fit into this other, how does this fit into my experience, I guess? How would you see that in this this way of looking at things?
John, that's an amazing,
the brain does
but
automatically.
you see, but that's my whole point. What the brain does automatically is the primary self.
Okay.
Because we talked about patterns. Primary selves are about repetitive patterns. Samskaras are about repetitive patterns. So when you say, your mind's like, okay, where does that fit with the pattern? That's a primary self trying to find its way. So I'm making such a big deal about this because that is the root of judgment. If you truly understand that, I tell you, you don't have to try to be non-judgmental. You will end up non-judgmental because you say a judgment, you feel a judgment, you think a judgment. Okay, hold it. Study it. Don't, oh, I'm judgmental. Baba said I shouldn't be judgmental. Pushing it away, you're creating more judgments. Because it goes under and it grows. You know, these parts that they're on the disowned selves, it's like I take you and I lock you in a dungeon. Dark, cold, 1 hour. I come and I open. You would say, what did you do that for, right? If I lock you in there for years, and then I open the door, you're not going to say, what did you do that for? You're going to attack me, right? That's what happens to these parts that we lock away. If we don't give them any time to express. So let's go to our family man who ran away with a 20-year-old, right? So here's a family man, husband, father, and then he's disowned, the single guy, breaks out and leaves the family. What could this man have been doing in the meantime so you don't have this, what we call flip? So if he's separated from father and husband, how could he be accessing a little bit his singleness?
He could do some things that he enjoyed that didn't involve the family.
Beautiful.
Yeah, he could have had
Beautiful.
some-
Go get a motorcycle. Go to California. You see what I mean? That's you know, it's as simple as that and as difficult. Because then the judgment, you know, oh, what would they say? I'm not a good father. But there's no awareness that actually you are breeding a beast over here. Yeah. From all these that I've been talking the last 3 hours almost, what stands out? What is like that? What was pleasant or unpleasant, but it kind of touched you? That kind of did something. Yeah.
Well, I was in a conflict with another person yesterday.
Oh, good.
And
Fresh.
It's been very fresh on my mind. The person was in a very needy spot. This was a telephone conversation in which that person broke down and was crying. And from my judgmental perspective, I was seeing, oh, you want me to join your pity party. I don't want any part of that.
Who was talking there, Anne? Who said that?
That was my primary self.
Beautiful.
Oh, I felt so much compassion for her from this.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. That is gorgeous, actually. Yeah. But that's all it takes to hear our primary self-talk. Who's talking? Who's saying that? And that, you see, creates separation. When you hear who's talking, immediately there's a separation and a chance to move. Yeah. Yes.
I have, I've experienced a few times, several times, when I get too excited about accomplishing something that I've actually accomplished, I subconsciously sabotage myself. For example, last year I was practicing the clarinet. I play in a community band. And I finally was able to play this little part quickly and perfectly. And and I turned around and did something else and sat on the clarinet and broke it in half. It was repaired, thank God. But I've had other things like that, and I know it probably comes from my family. You know, don't get too excited. Don't brag about yourself. Don't all this kind of stuff. But I'm not sure how to. You know, I know that's what I do, but I'm not sure how to change that quite.
So you have a primary self of I get excited about something. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, on occasion I
feel
get
proud
excited
that I did
when
that.
I'm being successful.
When
And
I'm being successful, and
I've
I know I'm being
I've
successful,
accomplished something and I'm excited about it.
and I feel proud, right?
Right.
I feel proud that I succeeded that. So that's a primary self. Who's on the other side?
Some kind of voices saying you should not be proud, or you should not brag, you shouldn't get too excited.
Okay.
I don't know.
And that, you see, you have it upside down. Your primary self is that you should not be excited.
Right.
You should be humble. That's your primary self. And when you get excited, it's your disowned self
I know.
that comes up.
That I know. Yeah.
So then the primary self goes and sits on the clarinet and breaks it. Do you see? It's the other way around. So for you,
Yeah, yeah.
your primary self is not the prideful, is the humble. Let's,
Right.
don't get too excited, just keep it down. And if that is your primary self, being humble, that's very interesting. That's a wonderful example, actually, of being humble. And we think being humble is the way to be, right? Being humble. And then who goes on the other side? The prideful. I'm proud, I succeeded, I play the clarinet. And you try to hold it down, but it broke through, it got excited. Then the primary self comes and takes care of that.
Punishes it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So my question is, how can I find
recognize
a?
it. You
I
need to-
recognize it, but what can I do differently to balance that?
First, you need to energetically recognize that your primary self is humble. And when you get excited, you need not the humble and not the pride. John, in the middle, needs to speak to the humble. Give us a break. Let us be excited right now. You see, that's why it's called voice dialogue. Literally, it's about honoring and respecting. Listen to me. I'm talking to you about respecting Samskaras. I mean, how weird is this? I mean, think about it. That's basically what I'm saying to you. Respect what they are saying, and then they will calm down. Because everybody, when they are seen, they feel calm. So it's almost like when you see, you don't ask permission from your humble to get excited. You need, when I do this work, even before I go to the other side, so you're talking to my responsible. Before, let's say, we go and talk to my irresponsible, I have to get permission of the responsible. You didn't get permission from the humble to get excited and proud. That's what happened there. And we are talking actual dialogue, which requires awareness, stillness, and you wait. Decisions take much longer. You move slower. And it's very difficult, John, to say to you, you say, yes, I know it, but is what I said before, this work, it's really working with energies. So every single primary self has a different energetic vibration. That's very important to understand. So if I am in the independent, I'm like, and if I'm my needy, I talk differently, I sound differently, I am different. I'm asking you to tell me the answer. It's very different. So each of these cells vibrate, not intellectually that I'm describing to you now. They feel in your body, they are palpable differently. Samskaras feel different. They have a vibration. They have a feel. Yeah. I have no idea if I answered your question or not. I did the best I could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
steered me in the right way.
Because, you know, it's very interesting. When you started talking, I thought the pride was a primary self, but it was not. The humble is.
Yeah.
You see? That's a big mistake. Yeah.
I have another question. This is just for me personally. You mentioned 36-hour workshops. Where do you do them?
Well, this year I'm doing them upstate in New York, and next year, next March, I'm doing them in Greece. So they are traveling.
Okay, I can talk to you about it afterwards.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah. So I was in the middle of asking, you know, what was kind of, I guess I'm asking what was helpful for you in this?
I think even, I was thinking about this, that even with growing up, God, concept of God, Baba as a judgmental God, you mentioned religion, you know, and I think a lot of us in the West, Judeo-Christian, but even Eastern, any religion, even spirituality, there's a lot of, I feel like a judgment, like supposedly in between lives, there's a life review that you see what you did, and like a movie screen, I'm being a metaphor, and I read a lot about that, and there's how you fell short of love, and there's a heaven and hell state, and you feel the pain of who you hurt, and there's how far you fell from the concept of love. And it's compassionate. It seems judgmental though, because a lot of people that have been mean were wounded as kids in childhood. A lot of hurt people, a lot of them, generally speaking, a lot of people that have been through trauma, whether it be criminals, some of the worst things, have been wounded. And it just seems judgmental of God, Baba, to have a system where you have this life, you know, you incarnate to love. Love wants to know love. Who am I? The whole system, and you go through different lifetimes of karma. Supposedly, I've read a lot. I've been around spiritual. There's a life review, and Baba had in his discourses called the heaven and hell state of, you know, of who you hurt, and then you know, it's all love, but you experience what they felt with people that you verbally hurt or physically hurt. It's supposed to be painful, you know, but good, but a cleansing. It just seems judgmental. I know, you know, and then somebody said to me, there has to be, yeah.
It seems that judgmental because it is.
That's,
Okay?
I don't know how to reconcile that.
Okay? Love, this business of love, it became a business of love because the minute you try to love, it's not love. What I've been saying the last 3 hours here, if you didn't get it, you end up loving without trying. Because if I'm holding and I see the gifts and the limitations of both sides, what did I say before? What's the need to forgive? Love emerges from a different place. There's no effort. There's no rule. I have to love you. There's none of that. The I have to love comes from a primary self, and it's a prison, and it's judgmental. You are right on with that. So that's why I go around in Baba groups and I try to present this, because it's so easy to be locked into a spiritual self and be even more judgmental and bring even more darkness, because there's no awakening, awareness that it's an embracing of everything. It's not this is good and this is bad, this is right and this is wrong. Because that's, I mean, of course we live in duality, and that is the definition of duality, and we cannot escape it. So when you leave this workshop, if you say it was a great workshop, it's a judgment. If you say it was horrible, it's a judgment. If you say, that's why I keep asking you, what stood out for you? What would you say you're walking out with? Because that doesn't have any judgment. It was what it was for you. Yeah.
Well, but what stood out for me is the power of the disowned selves, and how easy it is to be unaware of that.
You know, Keith, the disowned self has the same power as the primary self. It's equal and opposite. Right on. Right
What
on.
stood out for me was that you actually have a choice. You can listen and station yourself. You know, in that place where you have a choice. You listen. You know, you have a choice to listen to the primary and then kind of shift and honor both.
And honor both. That's the key. That is the key.
Yeah.
Honoring both. So, pleaser, selfish. You have both. Whether you like it or not, we carry both. Some of us are more pleasers, some of us are more, we go this way or that. But if you understand that both, like I kept saying, have gifts and limitations, then you for the first time have the choice to know you have a choice. That if you do something that is more for yourself, it doesn't make you a bad person. And if you do something just to please someone, is nothing for you. To please someone is not that you're the greatest person. By the way, it took me years to understand this pleasing situation. Because Baba, of course, says pleasing, making others happy. Happiness is making others happy, right? But I'm telling you years to come to this simple thing here. In primary selves, when you have a pleaser, remember what we said, why the primary selves are formed? To protect vulnerability. Remember my thing? Is over the primary selves? Well, I want to show it to you. Okay. So the selves form, the self form to protect vulnerability. So they have a good reason, all right? So when you form a primary self of pleaser, I want to make you happy, I want to make you happy, guess what? There is something for me, and that is, if I make you happy, you won't get angry at me. You will love me. You will want me. So there's an underlying expectation there. It's a hook. Whether I realize it, I admit it or not, it's there. Okay? I'm pleasing you, so you will like me, you will want me. What Baba is talking about pleasing others, it's not from a primary self, is you do it and you forget it. You forget you did it. That's very different. That's not the pleaser I was talking about. What Baba talks, happiness is pleasing others. That's not the one. So, in concluding, but it's not about concluding really. It's really about holding it here. It can never be concluded. It can never end. You know, so this awakening, this separating from primary selves, it's really, really hard work. That's why most of us don't do it. It's hard work. It's hard work. It involves incredible awareness, listening, noticing what we do. We are very good in noticing what others do. How are they wrong? How are they, you know? But it's so, it blinds us to not what we are doing wrong, just basically what we do, what we say, what we don't say. Yes?
It's tempting to think that, okay, if we all get this and get good at it, what about all the other people? Like, we can always look at ourselves and that's what we need to do,
Robin,
always.
that is the best question, I tell you. The minute we get into an argument and I say to myself, what is my role in this? I can't stand Robin when she does that. That's what I never do. Immediately, in our argument, even if I say nothing to you, nothing of this, but it's happening in my mind, immediately, it's a step back. And you will feel something, you don't know what you're feeling, but the intensity and the charge between us, it goes down.
So the dance is over.
What is the fastest way to end a tennis match? One person puts the racket down. That's the answer. And that's an excellent question. So not everybody has to be here. Not everybody has to know this. But those that do understand it, we can make a difference by asking, what is my role? Who in me is saying this right now? Just it's as simple as that. Yeah. So I'm going to read what I read in the very beginning and see how it feels to you after all these. Right? So living in harmony means embracing the existence of disharmony. Embracing the existence of disharmony becomes easier when one understands the anatomy of judgment. Understanding the anatomy of judgment enables one to live in harmony. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming.